guys have probably all have heard what has happened. Mamdani has won the New York City primary, which is now pitting him against Eric Adams, the current mayor, who's running as an independent because he didn't think that he could make it, rightly didn't think that he could make it through the Democratic primary. And we just heard a few hours ago that Andrew Cuomo has decided to remain in the race. There's been some talk that he would drop out of the race because they were afraid that they would divide up the opposition to Mamdani. But it sounds like it's going to be essentially a three-way in addition to the Republican candidates. But given the voter registration landslide advantage that Democrats have, it's highly unlikely that a Republican will win. I'm just going to get right into it. And I might say something that might offend some folks, but go ahead.
Do it, girl.
Okay. Thank you for the nod.
Sink your teeth in.
I am absolutely stunned that the city that is famous for being terrorized by Islamic terrorists is on the cusp of electing Islamic extremists who is chanting globalized intifada as its mayor. That for me is just jaw-dropping. This is 24 years after 9/11. And it just completely blows my mind that this is happening. But putting that aside, I also want to address his Marxist agenda and all the things that he's laying out as he's posturing himself, portraying himself as a man of the working people. But my view is that it's basically a Trojan horse for government takeovers of many different programs. For example, he promises free buses, city-run grocery stores, a rent freeze, a 30 minimum wage, but who is paying for that? Because as we all know, there's no such thing as a free lunch in American society. Someone is paying for that, and it's working class families in New York City. And we've seen the same thing play out in cities like San Francisco, and it's been an absolute disaster there. And this New York City is a home of Wall Street and real estate empires. His policies would devastate the economy there and drive a lot of big money out of the city, the same money that drives the economic engine of arguably the greatest city on earth. And I'm from Philadelphia, and I still concede that. I believe that his Marxist playbook will crush the economic engine. Beyond that, he continually uses the inflammatory slogan, globalized intifada, which I think raises huge red flags. He claims it's about Palestinian rights, but from what I hear is Jew-hating extremism. And given the heavy Jewish population in New York City, I think his incendiary rhetoric, it undermines the fabric and the essence of the city and is just a tremendous show of disrespect. Democrats, on the other hand, they praise his identity politics, they praise his diversity, but they conveniently ignore the words that he chooses to use, which I think is extremely loaded. And he also portrays himself as a struggling immigrant, but let's not fool around here. He is an Ivy League activist rather than a genuine activist on behalf of working class Americans. And Democrats prop him up as a champion of diversity, but a lot of Black and Latino leaders said, hey, we don't want this guy. He's going to take away our influence. He's going to undermine the working class. And that's why a lot of them went for Andrew Cuomo instead in the primary. And from my point of view, this isn't so much as an endorsement of Mamdani as a rejection of Cuomo, whom a lot of people see as corrupt and a vestige of a dying political dynasty. Lastly, one quick thing. I think this is another manifestation of the extreme leftward lurch of the Democratic Party, and one reason I was forced to leave. I can't get on board with state funding of gender-affirming care. I can't get on board with the Marxist policies, the government-run groceries, and just today he came out with another proposal. He wants to tax whiter neighborhoods to pay for everybody else. Nat, do you have the article that I put in the production doc? The Newsweek article, can we show that? But that's it. This is, did you find it? Oh, no, it's fine. But
yeah. Well, while we're looking for that, I was going to let Anna respond, if that's okay. But did you make that last point, Lindy? I was going to let Anna.
One quick thing. I'm just saying that his when the Democratic Party gives fodder to Republicans who are rightfully saying that these socialist Marxist policies aren't going to work. And honestly, it flames it. This is an electoral advantage for Republicans, I think, because a backlash against him will galvanize voters and encourage them to go to the polls, not just in New York, but across the country, because people don't want this. We rejected that in 2024.
Okay,
So,
Anna, go.
I'm just curious, is there a day you wake up where you don't see terrorism everywhere? Because you literally just implied that this guy's a terrorist. And I found that bigoted, Islamophobic, and absolutely disgusting. If you don't like his policies, I can understand that. And we can have a discussion about those policies. But it seems like you just have a problem with the fact that he's Muslim. You have a problem with the fact that he looks a little different from other previous leaders. Don't interrupt me. I'm still speaking. I didn't interrupt you. Listen. The problem with that mayoral race is that the Democratic candidates who ran against him in the primary offered nothing. They offered nothing but the status quo. Andrew Cuomo was the former disgraced governor of that state who somehow thought that he had, I don't know, the entitlement to have his past erased and that people would totally accept him again. I'm really happy to find that the people of New York City rejected him because he's a complete and utter disaster. Now, as it pertains to Mamdani, we should actually talk about what he focused on as he was campaigning, because he actually did run a fantastic campaign. Even if you don't agree with his policies, he reached out to Trump voters in New York City and tried to figure out, hey, what is it that made you vote for Trump? What is it that's frustrating you about your current situation? He hyper-focused on economic frustration, much like Trump did, by the way, in 2016. That's what put Trump on the map. Mamdani did the same, although he had a little more substance to the exact policies that he wanted to implement. When it comes to government-run grocery stores, look, I agree. That seems a little weird. He was asked to elaborate on that a little more during a recent CNN interview, and he said that he wants to have one government-owned grocery store in each borough. So there would be a total of 5. That would cost about $60 million. Obviously, that would be paid for through taxpayer money. I do not like, I want to be clear about this, and I think this is a huge flaw among the left, okay? When they target racial groups, when they say we want to tax white people, it turns people off, including me. Don't do race-based garbage like that, okay? But aside from that, and I do think that was a foible, I mean, let's talk about what else he focused on. I mean, he focused on so many different things. So he went to those halal street vendors, and that was his first political ad, where he asked them, how is inflation impacting you and your prices, how much you're selling these, street food items for. And being able to actually connect with ordinary people is what put Mamdani on the map. Okay, this nonsense about him being a terrorist, I'm rejecting that.
First of all, I said he was on the street and never called him a terrorist. And I'm with all due respect,
Lindsay, and it was gross. It's gross.
How are you condoning his usage of globalized intifada? Is that
I think
okay?
it's stupid. He probably shouldn't say stupid stuff like that because it's going to be misinterpreted. I know what he meant by it. It doesn't matter though. People like you are going to be shivering about it. So he shouldn't use words like that.
Because it was a horrible thing to say. He should not have said it. It's absolutely unacceptable.
Okay, Dave, go. I could go. Your turn.
Well, I mean, I guess I could kind of split the difference a little bit between the two of you. I don't think city-owned grocery stores are just a weird idea, and I think his plan for freezing rent-stabilized apartments and increasing the number of rent-controlled apartments, I think these are all going to be disastrous policies if they're enacted. I don't like to see that stuff win. I just feel like there's a level of delusion amongst the Democratic establishment who's so opposed to this guy, and it's almost like they don't see two very obvious things to me as an outsider who's not a Democrat, and not, I guess, anymore a New Yorker, although I was born and raised there. Okay, number one, the Democrats, the establishment of the Democratic Party, they're the most humiliated, castrated, discredited political group in the world. They literally they went all in for 8 years saying that Donald Trump was the greatest threat in the history of the world and that he was a Russian spy who led an insurrection and denied the results of an election, and democracy is over if this guy wins again. And then when the time came, the best they could field was a senile, career politician who was an unimpressive dimwit before he lost his mind, and was just like totally attached to every disastrous policy in the last 40 years in America, the war on drugs, the war on terrorism, just everything. He was all over it. Then at the last minute, when they realized he was too senile to run, they subbed in like a cackling retard to try to be the one who stopped it, and they just got totally humiliated. The guy who they said was the greatest threat to humanity wins every swing state and the popular vote, and then they want to walk back. And then now when they're so scared of this guy, the best they could feel was Andrew Cuomo. It's like the guy who just destroyed the state. Did they not realize how much people have woken up to how insane COVID was and how wrong he was about everything? Oh, and by the way, add in, he murdered senior citizens.
Yep.
Like murdered them. He forced these nursing homes who were begging and pleading. I mean, if you could think back to what it was in May of 2020 to send COVID positive patients into a nursing home, that's premeditated murder. Like, for a fact people will die as a result of this. Then he covered it up. Then he lied to Congress about the cover up. I mean, the guy is like, the fact that they would even run him or that he's considering running as an independent now is wild. And look, the fact here is, all this stuff about saying, oh, he hollered, globalized the intifada. Nobody cares about this except people on TV and like people in very specific advocacy groups or something like that. It's just not what actually matters to people. The fact of the matter is that Andrew Cuomo, because he's such a member of the establishment, brought in all of the baggage of the war, which really should be irrelevant to the New York City mayoral race. But he brought in all that baggage. The truth is that Democrats in New York City, including the Jewish ones, don't support what Israel's doing to Gaza. And for him to be asked in the debate about whether he would commit to visiting Israel or whether you believe in a two-state solution or a democratic one-state solution, this stuff was just goofy. I mean, if they were smarter, they should have asked him about the concern that Jews in New York have about anti-Semitism or something like that. But the fact is that the Democratic establishment, as always, had to carry defending the wars, which is largely impossible. Whereas Mamdani ran a campaign very specifically targeting the unaffordability of New York City, which is the actual crisis, not who hollered intifada one time and what you mean by that. Okay. No one cares about this stuff. The fact is that the price inflation over the last few years has just been killing regular people across this country, but nowhere nearly as terribly as New York City, maybe Los Angeles. But that in New York City, to be a regular person, it's just like impossible to survive there now. And while I do think that a lot of his prescriptions to the problem will only make it worse and aren't good, like at least he was talking about it. Yeah, but at least he was talking about it. That's the whole game. Then you got to get in there and make the argument. Make the argument about how your policy will actually drive the price of chicken over rice down more than his will. Or look, he did a video on the chicken over rice thing, and he didn't even realize at the conclusion of his video, the whole problem was a crony government program. It had nothing to do with capitalism where you needed some government program. You needed to stop giving out the licenses to street vendors to these cronies. But regardless of that, at least he's talking about real issues that people actually care about. And that's why he won. He wasn't rejected by the people. He beat the former governor of the state who's born into political royalty as essentially a nobody. So he should, if people, whether you like him or hate him, you should look to this race. There's a lot to be learned there.
Dave, I think it's unfair to just poo-poo incendiary rhetoric like globalized intifada, because I know a lot of Jewish Americans who are offended by such language. You're
talking to one of them. I'm a Jewish New Yorker, and I promise you, it's fine.
Maybe it doesn't bother you, but I have Jewish friends who are bothered by that, especially given the escalating anti-Semitism around the country, not just in New York.
There's a real problem. There's a real problem with paranoia in the Jewish community. I'm well aware of it. I'm probably much better than you are. It's fine. Jews are doing fine. We're thriving. Don't worry.
Okay, well, I know some people feel differently, but I do want to say in terms of government-run stores, you know what happens when governments take over merchandise? Look what happened with alcohol. Government-run alcohol shops, the purpose, the end result was...
Lindy, just hear me out. Lindy, you are a communist compared to me. You have no idea. I believe I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I don't believe in any government whatsoever. So like, but you don't need to convince me about how
no,
government messes up pricing mechanisms.
This isn't a reply to you. I just wanted to add to the point that government run anything is a recipe for disaster. And I can assure you that I'm not a communist by any stretch of the imagination. The communist regime in China murdered my great-grandfather. To say that I'm anything associated with them is actually quite
No, just compare to me. No, compare to them.
All right.
Compare to them. You're a free market
like
libertarian. Yes, compare to the Chinese communist, you're a capitalist, but compare to me, you're all a bunch of commies.
All right. Well, I can, maybe that's true. But I just want to say that all of his recipes, all his prescriptions for New York City, it's just horrendous. The most grating for me is his plan to tax whiter neighborhoods. It's extremely divisive, and he ran as a person who would encourage unity. This is precisely that kind of thing.
Listen, again, I'm just making the point that, like, look, there's a certain point where you lose the moral high ground. You lose the right to even make that argument. And as one of the biggest funders of the Democratic Party, while they were in the lockdown regime, you just really don't get to tell anyone else about how they're going to ruin the city or how they're going to pit people against each other.
Because I wasn't one of the biggest funders during that time. I was in 2024. That's actually incorrect. I have to.
So, okay. So after they did that, you rewarded them with funds.
No, actually, 2024. I did nothing to perpetuate the COVID lockdowns. Actually, that was one of the catalysts that had me leaving the party.
Well, that's great. That's great. But anyway, the Democratic establishment doesn't get to lecture people about pitting everyone against each other after the
I'm not part
pandemic
of the Democratic establishment.
Okay,
I actually expose them and their corruption.
Okay, fair enough. But there's the Democratic establishment has lost the right to look at the left and say, oh no, that's going to cost too much money, or oh no, that's going to pit people against each other. And literally, and this is the fact now, the left wing of the Democratic Party is the only one who's got any enthusiasm or any shot to do anything. It's sorry, you're dealing with AOC and Bernie Sanders now because no one wants to hear from Chuck Schumer ever again. That's the reality.
It's
I
true.
want to argue with that, actually.
Hold on, I want to throw this out, and then I want to go to Amy so she can comment. So the reason this matters to me, and I'm curious if this is one of the reasons it might matter to people who do not live in New York that are on this panel, is because it seems to be a fight for the soul of our cities, our big cities. And in my opinion, some of his positions, both economic and social, are radical and scary. So when I look at just his economic policies, right? This is a guy that's never run a business, let alone a city that has $100 billion budget and a $2 trillion economy. And The Atlantic, which is very liberal, likened his campaign to magical realism, claiming it was exuberantly disconnected from actual government budgets and organizational charts. And when you look into some of the policies he's talking about with regard to free public transit, the MTA is going bankrupt. It's a disaster. You have to fix that first. And what are you going to take away from to give to that? Like, what is going to suffer? Is it going to be sanitation in the city? Is it going to be emergency response? How are you going to fund this stuff? This guy needs billions of dollars, but he's chasing rich people out of the city, or those kinds of policies are, and we're seeing it in real time. So here's a number. New York lost over $24 billion in taxable income in a recent year due to out-migration. And you know that a top 1% are already paying 40% of the income taxes. Capital is mobile. So you guys are completely right. He is addressing very real problems. The questions we need to ask, are his policies going to make them better or worse? When you look at public housing, it's already completely mismanaged. It's a mess. There are billions in backlog repairs. There's crippling inefficiency and corruption, and you could be adding more bureaucracy to it. So while this guy is saying all of these things that people want, like lower rent, more affordable food, free transportation, the way he's proposing to go about it is seemingly catastrophic. And if I could clear up one other thing, I think we got to get away from democratic socialism, which I'm not for, but it's very different than authoritarian socialism where we reference Mao, and I want to throw that out there and then have Amy jump in here and give your thoughts. And specifically, if you have anything to address about my concerns, both with regard to his economic policy. Lindy brought up some of his social positions. I am absolutely against taxpayers funding gender-affirming care for children or adults, particularly egregious when it comes to kids. And now I'm passing. Go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult because it's like, what is the lesser of two evils, right? And I agree with a lot of Anna and Dave's points. I mean, for me, I think sometimes it's better the devil you know than the devil that you don't. I'm extremely terrified of seeing New York turn into the UK. The grooming gang scandal is not something that we had the opportunity to talk about today, but it would have honestly bled perfectly into this story. You see what it's like when there is a Islamic monopoly in government, in all of these institutions. And it's just insane the way certain things have been covered up in those instances. The cultural difference between, Islam and between the American people is like, it's just untenable. The two cannot coincide together. And yes, maybe some of his policies have not been outright Islamic, but do you think he would phrase them in such a way to be able to bring people in? No, of course, he's going to operate under the guise of socialist policies, hoping that nobody has done their due diligence, hoping that nobody has seen the way that these socialist policies play out all over the world. I come from a country that has a mixed economy with a lot of socialist policies, and we have seen the way it has absolutely ravaged and wrecked Australia, okay? So I'm terrified of seeing New York become the next Melbourne, Australia, becoming the next UK. But I do believe, to something Lindy said, this could be a cautionary tale. Maybe this is a lesson that America needs to go through to see what these policies look like in practice. I
know that Jillian thinks of like the terrible policies that have been implemented in LA, and a lot of your your complaints I agree with, but what I'm really happy to see with Mamdani is it appears that he has learned lessons from these mistakes that have been made in big cities like Los Angeles. So for instance, Jillian, you mentioned the tax base, or a portion of the wealthy tax base, leaving New York City. Well, we know why they left New York City, and it was because of quality of life concerns, the same quality of life concerns you and I complain about here in LA, which is why Mamdani is not in favor of defunding the police, for instance, right? Like, he understands the importance of public safety, ensuring that there's order, that people are following laws. That is important. And to me, that kind of separates him from, honestly, the Democrats who pretend like they care about economic issues, but in reality, they just go deep into like identity stuff and whatever theater they engage in just to appear like they care about the people.
Was that a real? I saw he had some tweet. Was this? Am I getting got by like a screenshot or something? But I saw someone sent me the tweet where he said something like queer liberation is defunding the police or something like that.
That was real, Dave.
I haven't seen that.
I did see that, and listen, I think you probably, like Anna, have more insight into this than I do because I'm more of an outsider to this world. But there is something to me where I go, like, over the last 15 years, there was this period of like woke insanity and the left just losing its freaking mind. And maybe he's crawled out of that. But when I do see a post like that, and you're like, queer liberation is defunding is this Mad Libs of woke nonsense? Like, what does this even mean? In
fact, every time I see him speak publicly, he's very articulate. He thinks things through. Look, there are some policies that I don't think are going to work out so well. So I'll give you a specific example so you guys know that I'm an honest actor here. I'm not just supporting him to support him. Look, I think that the best thing you can do to lower housing costs is to build more housing. Cost controls have actually had a lot of negative effects. I've seen it happen in LA, for instance, where people are basically stuck in their rent-controlled apartments and they're unwilling to move because the second they do, they know that they're going to be in an unaffordable situation. To lower housing costs, you have to provide more supply. And so there have been rent freezes in New York City specifically before. Bill de Blasio had decided to freeze rents 3 separate times during his time as a New York City mayor. So it's not going to be the end of the world. But I also don't see that as the ultimate solution to a housing shortage that we really, really need to focus on. We need to build more housing. So that's an example of me disagreeing with him on one policy. Sure. There are other areas of disagreement, but I think
I appreciate that.
Yeah, overall, his focus on the economic concerns of people living in New York City, that is what made him a popular 100%. Candidate. Yeah,
I 100% agree with that.
Mary, can I bring up 2 points just to respond to something that Amy said? I didn't have a chance to. Amy, I want to applaud you for your bravery because you got the courage to say something that's actually really hard to say. Because every time someone has the guts to criticize Islamic extremism, they are smeared as an Islamophobe when that's not true. We have some
why do you think he's an extremist?
I'm sorry?
Are you just assuming he's
anyone who chants globalized intifada is an extremist? This is absolutely inappropriate to say, and you even conceded that.
But what
I also want to bring up another point that hasn't been mentioned at all.
Saying that his wife is extremely liberal and totally contradicts a lot of Islamic ideologies. And I've also seen people say, rightly so, that some of the policies that he is pushing are, very, very extreme and in some ways in alignment with those things. So, I mean,
I don't know. I'm not even disagreeing. I'm not even disagreeing with what Amy said necessarily. And I don't think, like, I grew up in New York City. I've known lots of Muslims in my life who were cool, and there was no problem with them being there. And I've met lots of great Muslim people. There's no question that the mass wave of Muslim immigration into Europe, which immediately followed the U.S. destabilizing the entire region, that worked out to be a disaster. I'll grant that. I just totally reject this idea that it is a brave statement to be like, oh, the problem is radical Islamic Muslims or something like that. That's literally everything I've heard from right-wing talk radio for 25 years. It's what almost every presidential administration of my life has been talking about all the time. This is some wild outside the box of pit. I don't know why you think that's brave, but when people are calling out the Israelis, that's like something
Israel, honestly.
There's also another point that hasn't been mentioned. I just want to say that this guy
for calling out the Muslims.
Mamdani just became a citizen in 2018. He's a new American citizen, and now he wants to run the biggest city in America.
I'd be fine with a restriction on that. I'd be fine with a restriction on that. I'd be fine with a rule that you have to be born in the country to be mayor of New York City. That's not really the point. I'm just saying, like, I don't think it's such a brave thing to call out the Muslims.
It is, and on this particular show, it is, because I've been shot down before. I'm just saying that it under these circumstances. So, Amy, I do want to give you credit for that. But I think if you want to lead the biggest city in New York, you need like a 10-year residence or something, just like in the Constitution. Like, he basically just arrived, and now he has, it seems really like he seems like a, what's the word for it? Carpetbagger?
Well, here's the one thing that I want to throw out.
You don't need to be an extremist. You don't need to be an extremist when your views contradict what the main views that we hold dear here in the West. I mean, you bring up the point that he is well-spoken, that he is articulate. I mean, that he's nice. The mayor of New York City was extremely nice, correct? And he not New York City, sorry, of UK. And look at everything that's happening there. So I think this argument about he's nice, he's well-spoken, he's buttoned up, like, that is not necessarily indicative of anything.
No, what matters is the policy, right? Like, what matters is the policy, and that's, and I would say that I would say,
though, Dave.
Sure, that's a fair point. I would say that I think one of the things that's frustrating about kind of like the democratic socialist arguments that I've just heard from years and years now, from Bernie Sanders obviously being the most notable American, is that they speak almost in this way, and this is what Mamdani is very guilty of, if you ask me, is that you speak in this way as if it's almost like it's a certainty that more welfare is better or higher taxes are better, and you'd have to be some type of bad person or something like that if you didn't just want to like, it's almost like, hey, why wouldn't we do that? It's as if the choice is, should we make everybody millionaires or no? I vote we do. I bet you're against it because but you might as well. I mean, you can kind of just reducto absurdum a lot of this away, where you're like, when he says, oh, we're gonna rent stabilize, X amount of houses, like, why not X plus 1,000? I mean, why the minimum wage at $25? Why not $55? Why not $55,000? And as soon as you start to do that, you realize, oh yes, there is a problem with just creating all of these socialist like programs. And that I have never seen any democratic socialist actually come out and grapple with and go, yes, look, obviously there would be a point where this would be incredibly destructive to the economy. They just always act as if more of it is better and you'd have to be a bad person to be against it. But again, I mean, I do think so, because I'm splitting the difference here. I do think a lot of the policies he's running on are bad. But the idea that you're just going to, like, through government fiat, say, that you're going to have more rent control or rent stability. This is just price fixing. It's the same logic as anything else. It's the same logic as me saying that the price of wheat can't go past a certain level or the price of eggs can't go past a certain level. And everywhere this experiment has been run, it always ends in shortages. It always ends in more poverty, because prices are not just something arbitrary. Prices are information that's delivered through the market that takes into account almost an unlimited amount of different signals. And if you're just guessing, imagine just one central authority trying to decide what should the ratio of the price of a banana versus cell phone be. It's not that easy to just pick it and not get it wrong. And when you get it wrong, you send all types of the wrong signals. It affects production and it results in more poverty. And so I don't think any of the policies are good ideas.
Dave, I couldn't agree more. And also, you haven't mentioned the $30 minimum wage that he's proposing. Who's going to pay for that? Studies have shown that at such a high point, businesses are not going to hire. They're going to lay people off, or they're going to have shorter, fewer hours.
Well, you don't even need studies to show it. You can figure it out with basic logic. Look, businesses are not engaged in charity, and so if you bring in, let's say, $28 worth of value per hour, and your boss pays you $20, they might do that, and they get the $8 and you get the $20. Once you bring the minimum wage up to $30, they're not going to hire someone who brings in $28 worth of value because they're costing the company. And we've seen this all around the city. There's freaking kiosks everywhere since the last minimum wage increase in New York City. So yeah, again, I think all of these policies are going to be destructive. That being said, this is the dynamic now. The liberals have to contend with the leftists because the neoliberals have ruined everything, including their own credibility.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much for watching Her Take. If you like the show, can you help us out by subscribing to the channel, clicking the notification button, sharing, commenting, joining the conversation? It helps us out a ton with the algorithm. We appreciate you.